Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We have our next guest on. It's Russell Jack, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Thanks, Doug.
Russell, thank you for being on our show today. You have some great things to talk about. I think we talked about before recently. You just released a book.
I did.
Right? Yeah. How has that process been for you?
It was a long process. I was actually kind of surprised. One of the questions I got asked our time was, what's the hardest part about the book process? And I said, I thought it was writing the book. No, once you're done writing the original draft, it gets really hard. I had a lot of fact checking involved, lawyers to contact, and I really wanted to make sure when this book came out that 100% of what was in it was very vigorously fact checked to make sure it was accurate. Because one of the goals of the book was to help people understand, hey, not only is MAGA a problem and how to stop them, but how can we diffuse what they're saying that is untrue with facts. So the name of my book is MAGA a Terrorist Movement? And like I said, you can reach me also on magaterrorism.com, and a lot of information on there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's so great. You did a fact check. I mean, something we all should be doing anyway. But as you mentioned, it's good because that way, I won't say you want to use a rhetoric against someone, but at the same time, you want to be able to say, hey, this is here. This is something that is in plain text that you can talk about. So, and I'm sure that must have been a drooling process, but also I'm pretty sure there's still some people who are going to be like, I don't believe that's true when this is right there in their face. And you're just going to be like, okay, well, listen, you have it. You take it where you want to take it for them. So that's amazing. So we'll get into talking about the book, but a little bit about yourself, Russell. Tell us more about you and your experience as an air marshal. I don't know how much you could talk about that, but what is a little bit about yourself and your background?
All right. Well, let me just talk about the 20 years I spent as an air marshal. Ever since I started my federal career back in 1997, I was a federal police officer for 5 years. I've done a lot of interesting things. I was on the special reaction team when I worked for the Treasury Department. Okay. And I was also a military officer. Back when I was younger at 18, I joined the military, went to Desert Storm. When I got back, I went through officer candidate school at Colorado Military Academy and got my commission and led a platoon for about a year and then went inactive. So including my 5 years of National Guard time, my 5 years of police, federal police time, and my just over 20 years as a federal agent, about 30 years, over 25 full-time that I've been working for the government. So the last 6 particularly is what drove me to write this book because of the upswing in terrorist acts by MAGA.
Yeah. And then as an air marshal, what is that process like, and how? I mean, obviously, you've probably seen a lot in our aviation sector in the last couple of years with COVID and just everything else that's happening. How was that process, and how was that something that you probably your trainers really kind of trained you for? And ideally, I'm assuming you guys are so much busier with what was going on nowadays.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. We've always kept very busy. There's never enough of us. I mean, there's no way we could have enough to cover everything we wanted to. I mean, that's true for every police department and every law enforcement agency. But yeah, there are periods where it definitely ramped up. COVID definitely made things interesting. I was a full-time instructor at that time as far as my adjunct assignment. So when COVID hit, and so it was very interesting because obviously it changed the parameters of how we train, how many people could be in there at a time, what you can and can't do. And I'm sure it was an interesting time for everyone. I wasn't the only one going through that. So, but it was challenging times. So, and then at the same time, we had all the other stuff going on.
Oh yeah. And did you have to do anything I guess in your experience, you have to do anything really crazy or outrageous or any, I don't want to say Karens, but really crazy, outrageous things that you just saw, you just probably is this really happening right now? Just kind of.
All the time.
Man,
yeah. So one of the hard things about the job was you always had to be on a low level alert. Yeah. So you were always watching and gaming what could happen, going through scenarios in your head. If this happens, I'm going to do this, and thinking in advance of problems. And of course, I mean, the bulk of the problems we had as far as actually having to get involved had to do less with, terroristic behavior. It had more to do with people just not behaving themselves. As far as the bulk of how many things we had to get involved in. But the more serious ones, obviously were ones that we thought could be terrorist related. So,
Wow.
and I obviously won't go into that stuff. So,
Well, obviously, we don't want to feel about that and not want to fly anywhere ever again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble. I mean, even though I'm
Yeah.
retired and I had a security clearance, there's things I can't talk
Yeah.
about.
I totally get it. But it's always great to know that that's something that you have that protection even in the air, because people don't assume
Absolutely.
that that's always there. So it's always great to know that regardless, that there is definitely sectors where, our government is protecting us and taking care of us. So that's good.
Absolutely. And we get the negative publicity as well. So, it's important that people do realize, the air marshals are highly trained, very motivated individuals that are out there protecting us even today. I'm even retired now that I'm a civilian. I'm all the more thankful for them because
Absolutely.
I'm getting on the plane just like you, unarmed, and hoping, everything goes great. And I'm depending on them to keep us safe. And they will. They're very good at their job, the men and women of the Air Marshal Service.
That's amazing. Well, let's get to your book. Also, what compelled you to write Is MAGA a Terrorist Movement? I know you talked a little bit about it, but give some more detail of what really drew you to really want to write
I think the biggest thing that caused that was after seeing the support of MAGA terrorism by counter-terrorist agents where I worked for years, especially the last 6 years I worked with them, and then seeing the escalation of violence and intimidation against both civilians and our government by MAGA. I knew I needed to speak up, especially, when I saw many people either openly supporting or staying silent about acts of terrorism that were being done by MAGA. And these are counter-terrorists that are supposed to be going after those people. So the fact that they had that agreement and support of a movement that was clearly criminal and engaged in acts, and we can cover later, the definition of terrorism, but were engaged in activities that did meet the definition and intent of terrorism. So that's when I realized, hey, we have a serious problem with the government. And once I retired, I was like, okay, now I can talk about it. Because needless to say, I couldn't talk about being an air marshal when I was still on duty and keep my job, because obviously I can't be out there as a undercover agent with a book that says I'm a retired air marshal.
Right. That'd be a lot more red flags that come along.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be happy about that.
Yeah. And then ideally, so you're saying that there was a level of like obstruction of justice, but also kind of, I guess we'll say like sweeping on the rug of things that are happening that we're not seeing every day, obviously, as civilians, and not what we're seeing outside the media. And that you kind of were kind of seeing a wrong that needed to be righted, but also just seeing probably just some really gnarly and just really bad stuff. And it had to be a point where you're just like, I what am I going to do? And I think a lot of people feel that way nowadays too. It's like, what are you going to do to change this? Or what can you do to bring awareness to it so that it's not a level of attacking, but also it's a level of just making people aware. And so I'm pretty sure that's what went into your book with doing that. But ideally, without going too much into it, how do we know this is still happening to this day? Do we still know that this is something that's going on, that's happening around us, that's still in our government, even though he's out of the White House?
Yes. One of the interviews I have coming up is going to be with someone who's conservative. They used to be part of the Republican Party, and they left that party when MAGA took control. And I can pretty much tell you the day that the Republican Party ceased to exist and became the MAGA Party. And that was when the impeachment of Donald Trump happened, and only 10 of them voted to impeach. If we'd had another 10, we wouldn't be going through all this right now. But what happened is they turned their back on their duty, in my opinion, and they thought to themselves, well, for my personal power, it'd be better off to stay in office if I just simply knuckle under and toe the MAGA line. I know I'll get reelected. I know I won't have a primary, to where I can get taken out by another person to take my job. And they're like, if I speak up, it's almost guaranteed that, Donald Trump's going to tweet out to his millions of followers. The MAGA base is going to be upset. And then next thing I know, I'm out of a job. I get voted out and a pro-MAGA Republican takes my place. So a lot of them, just for their own personal benefit and profit, said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and vote not to impeach. That was the day that their party started to die. And I feel bad about that. I'm not an anti-Republican, but I am a pro-law enforcement, pro-protecting law, pro-constitution. And I'm definitely anti-terrorist and anti-criminal, of which MAGA openly admits to doing and to continue doing. We're seeing a lot of those things happening even today.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, you think about January 6th and all these other things that happen and protesting and what's happening in the election today. You're right. It's gotten to a point where you're going from a level of policies and politics to just downright anarchy and
Yes.
causing a level of chaos that I don't know if that needs to happen. I mean, and it's sad to say because it's two sides to it when it comes to like you said, this level of being conservative and being Republican Party, and in the past we've had these differences, and that's okay to have those differences, but it's like it's never been to the scale where you're causing harm to people and you're just and you're backing it up, and then you have a potent leader at the time and even to this day that's just kind of enabling it. Not saying, hey guys, we should stop this or those cases, but just encourages it. And I think that's even more dangerous than anything else because it's like, think about when you're in school, you follow something other kids do. Billy did this or whatever case, and he's a cool kid in the group. You're like, okay, fine, I'll follow Billy. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong being a follower if that's your choice, whatever. Everyone has their own opinions, things they want to do. But just to make sure you're choosing the right person to follow. No one's perfect, and I don't think anyone should ever assume anyone is, But it's almost this point of like you're following someone that's just leading you into a path of just chaos, and yet you're okay with that chaos. It's almost like a toxic relationship. You shouldn't be with this person, but you're going to keep being with them, and exactly. And it's very sad that that's how a thing works. I was going to say in your book, you talked about also some of the actions you can take to kind of stop and counteract MAGA. If you can go into too much into detail without giving too much away, what are some of those things that we can do to really, really help those understand? And I want to stress this saying it's not to say we're stopping because you're idiotic people and that you should just go back to your land and do whatever you want to do, or go back to your country and live your life in the South and God knows what. But ideally, what can we do just to educate people and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Can I just let you know what's going on? These are the things that you're setting up, but can I just enlighten you a little bit about this? And if you want to make your decision after that, by all means, go ahead and do that. But without getting my tangent, how is it that you see that we can really kind of look at counteracting that?
Well, there's three ways that I talk about in my book. And also one of the things I want to point out is, yes, I mean, of course, I sell my book and of course, it'd be nice to get, nice high ratings to make up for the many 1 stars I've gotten from Pro MAGA. But one of the things I like seeing on there is when I see the positive reviews versus negatives, anyone who goes online and reads them on my book, you can clearly see on the positive reviews, they're like, hey, thank you for making a book that helps me, debate and understand how MAGA works and what they're doing and what their fallacies are. Mm-hmm. And the negative MAGA ones that come my way are all ones like, oh, this is trash. This is garbage. I skimmed the book and it was terrible. It's complete waste. He's just doing the left stuff. But none of them ever came back, maybe because my 157 endnotes, and said, hey, this thing he said is a lie. It's untrue. And here's the facts that show it's untrue. And the reason they can't do that is because they believe the lies in the right-wing media. The reason they shun all other forms of media is because they have to. I talk about it in my book about tribalism, about belonging to a group of people that in order to be included in the tribe, you cannot disagree with anything that tribe has to say. So if you're part of the MAGA tribe, if I show you facts and you're like, okay, this is an irrefutable fact and it counteracts something in MAGA. Well, if they dare to speak that, they'll be just like me. They'll be ostracized the moment they say it. So it's easier for them to go along with the herd. So you have the pro-MAGA group, you have the people who are keeping silent, and then you have the people who are speaking out against them. Going outside of my agency, where I saw this, my concern with the populace is we have kind of the same thing. One of the things I talked about in a different podcast is when you see a MAGA pickup truck go by with flying MAGA flags and pro-Trump stickers and anti-Biden comments and anti-left-wing stuff. I mean, I saw one that said, crying liberal tears. Okay, well, if they drove by with a big swastika flying or a Nazi flag, or they walked around with, Taliban or ISIS headscarves on, okay, there's no way people would be like, okay, I'm just going to tolerate that. They'd be like, what's wrong with you? They would confront them. Right. But the problem is that they have pushed to make this something where they want to encourage people's silence. So to answer your question, the very first thing is banding together these messages, these podcasts, getting my message out there. I mean, my encouragement to everyone watching this podcast is spread the word far and wide. Even if you don't buy my book, please watch the podcasts, look at the blogs. at least read the couple chapters in the book you can get for signing up the newsletter,
Right.
and then go out and tell other people, hey, this is really a problem. My biggest concern with MAGA is it's not being taken serious enough. Hitler was laughed at in the 30s before he rose to power. Same with the Taliban. They were a joke. Nobody took them seriously.
Right.
Next thing you know, they're in charge of the country. And we're having the same problem with MAGA. So the first thing is we want to get the word out to as many people as we can to say, hey, this really is a problem. And make sure you act on it by speaking out, by banding together legally, doing lawful things. We're not criminals and terrorists like they are. We're law-abiding citizens, okay?
Right.
Or we should be. I hope you are.
Yeah.
And then the other two things that come with that, in addition to talking to them about it, saying, hey, this is, what they're doing is wrong, and telling other people, hey, it's really a threat, and even talking to MAGA and saying, hey, what you're doing is not only un-American, but it's also illegal and unconstitutional. The other two things they can do is report any criminal activity. Terrorism is not only immoral, it is illegal. I heard a comedian once, I'm going to paraphrase, he basically said, don't think of them as laws, think of them as hints. Like, I wouldn't do that if I was you. That pretty much is true. If you're doing something deep down, you're like, what I'm doing is probably not right, there's a good chance you're breaking the law. There's a good chance there's a law on that, and you're breaking it. Okay, so the other thing is pointing out anything they do illegal. If the police don't respond properly, like they didn't in Texas, okay, because some of them are pro-MAGA, videotape them, report it to their superiors, or put it on social media. And the last one is vote. I mean, that's the most critical one. That's why I want to get that message out, especially to anybody who's not currently voting, who's just sick of the politics. They're like, I can't stand either party. Joe Biden's getting older. And for me, it's very simple. It's not a question of, well, which octogenarian candidate do I think, is the best choice? It's more, do I pick a guy who's openly said MAGA is a problem and they're basically a terrorist group and they're trying to destroy our democracy, and he's doing what he can to keep our checks and balances? Even if he was a terrible president, I would vote for him over someone who openly says he's going to retaliate against anyone who worked against him. He's going to free hundreds of terrorists from prison from the January 6th with pardons. And it's going to do everything he can to destroy the checks and balances of the government and get himself in as a very powerful president, aka dictator, with one party in charge. And one party in charge with a powerful dictator on top is literally the definition of fascism. So that term gets thrown out a lot. People say, well, I'm not fascist, you are. I've heard that from MAGA. I'm like, no. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party is not doing anything that shows an intent to establish fascism. Okay, you may not like them or what they support,
Right?
But they're definitely democratic, not fascist. If you look at the MAGA party, there's no argument their acts and their behavior are terroristic and fascist.
No, that's so true, and it's almost like it's right. Like, let's go back to this again. It's dead beaten in your face. And it's still that people don't see the fact of how dangerous he is as a person. And it's sad to say, it's like, it's not about Republicans. It's not about it's MAGA. And it's also just like people not educating themselves on things and just want to look at things as such a way of like, this is right, this is wrong. I mean, listen, our government is not perfect. Okay, no one's sitting here saying that at all. No one's saying it's going to be corrected in one term president or another term president. Yes, it's a vicious cycle we go through every 4 or 8 years. This happens. But go back to what you said earlier. We said when it comes to voting, you voting are people having a choice because it is still your country. You still can have a difference. It may not feel that way, and I think that's where people get discouraged. And you could probably contest to this: is that, oh, I voted for someone. My person didn't win, but now I'm stuck with this. But okay, I get that and I understand that. But at the same time, you took a chance, you went out and voted, you did something different. Okay, then maybe do something in your local chapter, maybe do something at the local level of your government. It may not have to be something big, but it could be something small. And I think sometimes I remember it's always the small things, because if you look at MAGA, they weren't huge, but now look at them now. It took little things that happened, and now it's become a whole movement. It's become a whole level of just injustice, and it's almost like I'm just going to do it because I know I can get away with it, and no one's going to stop me. It's just sad. It's just very sad to see that.
Yeah, there's millions of MAGA terrorists. If you look at polls that they've done, and there's no reason to refute that. I mean, MAGA themselves says, "Hey, we believe in these things," but there are millions, according to polls, that support what happened on January 6th. They're like, "Yeah, that was a good thing." Okay? Yeah. And we have tens of millions of them that support MAGA. So, the fact that we had a vote last time at 81 to 74 million, the fact that 74 million people voted for a man who openly supported fascism. Now, I would be curious to see how many of those 74 million voted for it if that election occurred after he attempted a coup. I'd be interested to see how many still hold on. But unfortunately, I think it'd still be a pretty high number. You have a really large number of new Republicans, I'll call them, the MAGA Republicans, that support Trump. And in fact, the poll I read that's in my book at the time I read the poll, over a third of them think better of him after January 6th. And 88% would still support him, even if he ended up the candidate that, even if during the primaries, a person was trying to get somebody else to be president, back when that was going on.
Right.
Even back then, something like 88% of them would still support Trump if he was the candidate for the Republican Party. And that's where I feel bad for the Republicans, is because they've lost their party. Their party was about law and order. I think it was the Republican National Convention put out a thing in 2016. And they said, the first thing we have to do is support law and order. And the person who's going to be our next president needs to renew the trust between police and citizens and has to first uphold the rule of law by following it himself. And I think what I said after that was something like, well, how do you do? Terrible. So the Republican Party's law and order premise is they're going completely against it with MAGA. MAGA is engaging in all sorts of illegal activities.
Yeah.
And they're just getting a blind eye turned to him because they have enough powerful people in government to basically say, yeah, no, he didn't do it. That's what happened with the impeachment. I mean, I don't think, putting emotion aside, let's say it was a Democrat. He was on my side and I really liked the candidate. Okay. If they showed me the evidence of everything he did and it matched what Trump did, I'd be like, yeah, impeach him. In fact, put him in jail, because looking at it, you're like, yeah, there's definitely all the elements of a crime there, and that definitely counts as high crimes and misdemeanor if you, attempt a coup.
Yeah. And it's like people don't understand that, we think about, there's different sides of liberalism, and being a liberal. You have your far left liberals, you have your, moderate liberals. But I totally agree with you. Like, if I saw a candidate that I cared about do some things that are just against us on so many levels, I'm with them. Like, okay, yeah, do what you have to do. Because we're not standing for the truth or justice of what it's about. You're just really harming the country more by doing that. And it could be someone I cared about tremendously, sure. But if they did wrong, they did wrong. And hopefully, if they're a good person, they realize they did wrong. They learn from it, hopefully. Don't do it again. And are better for it. Or at least, I have people who had my back to understand. Because as you mentioned, no one stands up to him. He just says what he wants. They're just like, oh, okay. It's like, no, you got to say something, because he's just like, it's almost like you look at certain people, and I think of you the world of celebrities, which they're probably where he got this from, not Dilly. It's like, there's no one telling you no. And we see what happens to people like who don't get told no. They either go in dark paths, they go do certain things. They have no checks and balances. I mean, look at our child stars. Some came out really well and amazing. Some not so much, because you're in this world of like entitlement, and you're in this world of, and that's how he feels in his head, this world of entitlement of like, I'm going to overpower and do this. I'm going to be the greatest person ever that lived to do this. And you're just like, what goes on in that mind of yours every day to think that you think this is okay, that you think this is the way it's supposed to be?
I can actually understand from his perspective. He's, I have to say, alleged. He's a successful alleged career criminal, if you want to look at it that way.
Wow. At this point, you're not wrong.
At this point, he's still an innocent man. He has not been proven guilty in a court of law, so I'm going to use the word alleged. But looking at just the amount of charges against him, the things that he's purported to have done, the evidence that's out there, things that he has done, even lawsuits and things of that nature, you're looking at a guy who, for decades, has done wrong things and been rewarded for it. He became president of the United States. People voted him into the office of POTUS, knowing that he had done these bad things. And I'm just like, wow. And the part that amazes me now is you have the Republican Party, the party of law and order, that's supporting a president who openly breaks the law. Then you have the evangelical Christians that are supporting a man who is probably the farthest thing from a good Christian you can find. So I don't understand why they have that level of fervor and support for him, why he has that cult of personality, until I start thinking about, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but you have to be pretty dumb. So we have a large number of not very intelligent people. And when I say that, one thing I want to make clear too, I use the word stupid in my book. I'm not being insulting and mean. The definition of stupid is someone lacking in intelligence or reason. There are many highly intelligent people that are not reasonable. And that's what we're running into now. I mean, there are many MAGA members who are highly intelligent. I mean, some of them PhDs, some of them,
Sure.
have worked very technical careers. But you have to lack reason. When you see all the things that have happened, you put all the dots together, you have to say, wait a minute, this is not a good Christian. This is not a good Republican. In fact, this isn't a person who's going to protect our laws or our democracy, liberal democracy at all. If you're like, okay, I know that, but I'm a Republican congressman and I want to keep my position of power, so I'm going to give it lip service. And then, to my friends, I'm going to say he's an idiot. Okay. Those people I understand. They're not good people, but I understand them. What I don't understand is the 90+% of the followers that truly believe it, that aren't getting rewarded.
No.
So
no. It's
I
not
mean, one of the things. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like, you're so right, because people are either getting fired from their jobs and taking things away from them, and it's almost like, oh, it's the system's against me, and it's the far liberals who are taking my jobs, and it's like, no, you did that. No one else did that. You did that to yourself. And it's like you said, it's the lack of accountability for your actions. And we always want to keep blaming other people for the things that happen. And that's a far reacher thing that needs to be talked about on different levels of psychology and everything else that's out there. People can't take accountability for their actions. He doesn't. And that's why it happens. He doesn't take accountability for anything. Well, I didn't say that. I didn't do that.
And that's the interesting thing. He's been proven wrong.
Yeah, you're like, what? But it's that vicious cycle of non-accountability that keeps things going on. And like I said, once again, the government's not perfect. They are not accountable for some things, but it still keeps a level of law and order to the point of keeping the country running, and we're going to have our differences. We're going to have different ways of doing it. But ideally, it could be a lot worse in other countries and other things that are happening. It's kind of sad that having him in office has diminished who we are as Americans around the world, which I've seen on my own travels. And it's like, we're a great nation. I mean, we built ourselves on foundation and, trying hard and revolutionizing things. And now all of a sudden, because of this man, everyone looks at you differently as an American. And you had to almost like justify yourself for being an American. And you're like, no, I still love my country, but like, I don't love what's happening currently. Which anyone could say about any country they live in. But I've seen such a huge, huge decline that I have not seen before. Because it's a place that people will come to, want to come and enjoy and to learn and discover and see what America's about. It's a land of the free, and there's a place where you can really make some of yourself. Nowadays, it doesn't feel that way. And even people who even live in America, you don't even feel like you can make it. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The whole economy could crash tomorrow, and we're just right back in the Stone Ages. I don't know. It's just it's these things that we're doing. We're not thinking about the long-term future of the accountability things that are going to happen along the way. We're not looking at what's going to happen within the next 4 or 5 years if he does something. We're going to just keep regressing, going backwards. And then guess what? Someone has to come in and fix whatever mess he did. And we're right back in the same pattern over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I found interesting is I heard a comment that somebody had said to somebody I know that, hearsay, that they said, well, don't you want to make America great again? When this person was saying, hey, MAGA is a bad movement. Well, here's the problem. The moniker sounds wonderful. Let's make America great again. Well, you know what? If I was going to make my life great again, let's say on a personal level, I say, you know what? I want to make Russ's life good again. Would I look back to when I was a child and try to become a child again? Would I try to recreate the 80s? No, I'd be like, okay, it's 2024. Where do I go from here? What do I do to make life better? Well, If you look at America the same way, there is no going back to the 1950s. Okay, that period's gone, and good riddance. I mean, no offense to people who lived then. Okay, but we have come a long ways since then. Okay, we have gotten better. Okay, we understand every person matters. And this is what bothers me with the actions and non-actions of some law enforcement out there. I can't speak for the military. I've been out too long, but I know they have a large component of pro-MAGA people in the military as well. They also have a serious problem.
Yeah.
But their job, and one of the things I talk about in the first chapter of my book, when an incident happened and I stood up, and so did one of my coworkers, okay, our job, no matter how you feel, doesn't matter. When you take that oath, you're there to protect everyone in America.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't matter who they are. They all get the same rights and protections. Okay,
Absolutely.
So your personal feelings of what's right and wrong or moral or immoral are irrelevant. You enforce the law and you protect people, and you don't care who they are. That's what's missing. And I think to answer your question a little bit better is, I think the biggest problem is they're trying to regress to a world that no longer exists and can't exist. Okay. The only reason they can make that world exist is why I'm fighting so hard. Yeah. And that is to put us back to the 50s by getting rid of amendments to get us back there. And that's the last thing I want. And so we're going to fight to keep that from happening. We've made a lot of progress in America over the last almost 2.5 centuries. I don't want to go backwards. Their slogan really should be, let's take America backwards again. No.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about it. Thanks. Dan.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true, because it is this level of this whole tier of, making things simple and great. But like you said, we advanced so much. We have so much technology. We have ways to reinvent ourselves. I mean, we have things in healthcare we can work on. There's things in our economy we can work on. There's ways how we can do business and work with other nations and be able to do these things and further that. But MAGA doesn't choose to care about any of those things. If they cared about these things and looked at these things, it could be a whole different argument we could be having, where it's like, okay, fine. You want to find ways to make more money for your family. I think I went back to, it was an article I read or someone was talking about, it was about the Midwest. And so we talked about how the Midwest really changes and kind of influences our elections. And it talked about how, our media has a way of putting, your far lefts and the far rights far, far apart from each other. But if you live in like states like New York or Florida, the big states, California, it's like when you look at states like Ohio or smaller cities, they feel like they don't have a voice. And so this went back to when he was first running. He talked about how he wanted to have a voice for everyone. And so everyone thinks that because you're from a big state, you just want to take their jobs. You want to take away, the industrial side of things. You want to take away. No one's taking any of those things away. Now, technology has changed to the point where certain blue-collar jobs are not there anymore. That is true. But that's also to say that there's new ways to reinvent those things and learn those things. And it's not a sense of taking something away, but also maybe replacing it, but looking at a better, more efficient way of doing it. And I think because people have such an older mentality or in a certain level of I used to do this, I go to work and do this 9 to 5, they don't want to make that change. And change is another thing that's really sad, because they think they're making a change for the better, but they're really making a change for the worse, because you're not making a change to the point of like, okay, great, something has gone obsolete. Let's look at certain things that are happening that's different. How can we make this work for the common family today? Obviously it's still not as expensive. I mean, think about it. I know New York City, and I live in New York City, is a big city, and I know it's a crazy place, and it's not for everybody. I get that. California's a huge city. It's not for everyone. It's not to say that your place in the world, in America, is not there. But it's the fact of saying that change is going to happen no matter where it comes from. But you can't blame the big cities. You can't blame the big government for everything that happens to you. Yes, there's certain things that go in the fact that it's happened, but that's the thing we have to change and look at. And this is why I go back to earlier, I talked about in your local politics, look at those things and how those can make a difference and change and see how you can make it better. But I think MAGA just wants to go on this whole tangent, like you took something away from me, and now I'm going to be a child, and I'm going to just say and rally against it, and I'm just going to go to the level of violence, which I don't understand why violence is the first thing that pops in someone's head. It's like, I didn't get my way, so let's tear down everything. And I'm like, but what is that going to solve for you? What is that really going to solve? What is that really going to do? Okay, you fought someone, you got into a fight. Oh, great. Okay. Do you feel better?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, you took out a vicious act on other people. I mean, you put those people's lives in danger on January 6th. I would have been okay if they were just to sit there and say, protest, be outlined of Capitol, and just have a peaceful protest. And be like, okay, great. Absolutely. That's your point. That's fine. It's not saying, no, not be there. It's just how you went about doing it. And also, you're tearing down your own country. This is like the things that your forefathers have built. You're actively destroying, but yet you want to make it better, but you're destroying it.
Yeah, I talked with a pro-MAGA coworker back when I was working, and he was saying, oh, they're going to try to take away our guns and they're fascist. And, I'm worried about them, destroying the Second Amendment. And I said to him, well, you should be worried about the First. And he got mad because he knew exactly where I was going with it. He goes, oh, don't go there. That's not true. What has Trump ever done? I said, well, he said that the free press is the enemy of the people as president of the United States. I'm like, that's pretty much a direct attack on the First Amendment. So what I find interesting is they're pro the First Amendment when it comes to protecting their religion. Okay. They're pro First Amendment when it comes to protecting their speech, but they're 100% against the First Amendment with everyone else's. Everyone else's religion, everyone else's speech, the hell with them. I mean, pardon my French. Sorry, I shouldn't cuss on the air. But that's basically how they feel.
You can do whatever you want.
I try to be polite. But yeah, they're saying, hey, it's okay to pass laws basically banning homosexuals or LGBTQ people, or saying, hey, you can't read a book that has a reference to it in it. So they started banning books. Okay, this is the kind of stuff the Taliban did. Okay, I mean, what's next? You're gonna, tear down anything that's pro LGBTQ or not evangelical Christian. I mean, so that's my concern with them. Freedom of speech is another thing we're going to go into on this real quick. Is I agree with you. Peaceful protest, I'm 100% for it. Part of the First Amendment is the right to address the government for a redress of grievances. That's part of it, or to peacefully assemble. Okay, that's what America's about. But as everyone knows, and as you explained, no matter what you're thinking, even if you're right, you're not allowed to use violence. Okay, that once that protest turns into a riot, then it's a law enforcement issue. What you're actually discussing doesn't matter at that point.
Right.
When they start using violence and police have to start using tear gas, we got a problem. Now, if they're using tear gas to get protesters away from a church for a photo op, that's not cool. So just if that happened.
No. And we talked a little bit about this, but why is MAGA like really a full threat to our liberal democracy? We're going to the level of democracy as whole. On top of things we've discussed, like what is really the main thing? And we look at this level, as you said, as terrorism. What is it really that's really scary and what we should really look into?
Well, the scary part is they're all interrelated. The terrorism is the methodology. They're not doing it for the heck of it. The reason they're using terrorism is to enforce their political will using violence and intimidation against the civilian populace and the federal and the governments. Okay, and they're doing that, and that's literally the definition of it. When it comes to liberal democracy, to sum it down to its parts, it's basically two or more viable parties with a separation of powers in the government and separate independent branches of government. And if we look at what's been happening under Trump and the MAGA Republican administrations, and even currently, they are working against the checks and balances. They are getting rid of some of the separations of power. If you look at what the Supreme Court just did, saying, oh, it's Congress that gets to make the decision on whether or not someone's an insurrectionist. Okay, they basically have rendered the 14th Amendment, Section 3, no longer applicable. Because who's going to enforce it? Now, yeah, it can still be done at the state and local level, but it can't be done at the federal level because any federal position, the state can't do anything about it. Well, the federal government doesn't have a mechanism in place to do anything about it. I mean, the Congress can impeach someone who's already in, although we saw how that went. But that's the only mechanism they have. They can't stop someone who's trying to become an incumbent. I actually wrote on one of my blogs, you can literally be a convicted felon and a convicted insurrectionist, not just sedition and conspiracy, but the much harder to prove actual insurrection law violation. You can be an actual insurrectionist and a felon and become a congressperson or president today. Jeez. And that's a huge problem with our system. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is very true. Wow. In your hindsight and when you had your book, what do you really, I guess, in your opinion, what do you really believe that, what does MAGA really believe? In your opinion, like, what do you think they really believe and what is their overall, I want to say, motive or mission in this political world that we live in today in our democracy? What do you believe is MAGA's overall cause? What are their beliefs, ideally?
Honestly, if you boil it down, it comes down to what you were saying. There are people who feel that they've been disadvantaged and victimized by global economies. And this is actually in the definition that I looked up. And obviously, this is a definition that's made up because the group's made up. Okay, but when they defined MAGA, and MAGA doesn't disagree with it, they talk about the fact that they want to return to traditional Christian values. Okay, and I know I'm picking a little bit on evangelical Christians, but if that particular group supports what MAGA is doing, they're doing it for the same reasons many people in MAGA who feel they've been disadvantaged by the way America's gone over the last several decades. And they're not concerned about freedoms anymore. They're concerned about how do we get in power so that I can be better off. And that's a scary road to go down. Anytime any group of people says, hey, I'm willing to break our laws, break our Constitution, break our way of doing government, get rid of rights, get rid of liberties to get what I want, that's going to backfire horribly. It always has. Okay. And a lot of people in MAGA don't understand that even if they win, they lose. because if they win, we've seen what happens with Germany. We've seen what happened with other fascist countries.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless you're the very top, you're not going to win. Even if you're very loyal to what you're doing, once freedom of speech is gone, once that First Amendment is either repealed or effectively repealed, like with what they did with the 14th Amendment, as soon as that happens, you have to be in fear of the government. Even if you're pro-MAGA, what happens if somebody just says something about you that isn't true? It's kind of like the teachers nowadays in Florida. They don't even have to say anything or show anything that's LGBTQ related. All that has to happen is one of their kids to go home, talk to their mom and dad and say, my teacher said this, even if they didn't. The kid makes it up. He doesn't like the teacher. He's mad at the teacher because the teacher made him sit in the corner.
Yeah.
He says, oh, yeah, the teacher said this and this. Next thing you know, the teacher's out of a job. Okay, so they have to live in fear. That's what I'm getting at, is living under a fascist government, 90+% of those people will be living in fear, including MAGA, because they have to fear for what could happen to them if they're not perceived as a true patriot. And like we talked about, any one topic where you veer off course and you're done. So yeah, it's pretty scary. I think what MAGA really wants is they want their group to have power. Now, whether that's because they want traditional Christian values, like some of the religious organizations support them, or whether they simply want power. They want to have better taxes. They want to have better jobs. They want to have things handed to them. And like we talked about before, we're not losing our jobs because of, the mean left. Okay. It's called progress. I mean, we don't have people regularly shooting horses anymore either. Okay?
No, I don't think we
so. Yeah. I mean, that's just normal. Progress and change is part of life. And there's a lot of people in America who can't handle that. They say, hey, no, I want my coal job back. Okay, well, that's great. But we're going away from coal because it's really bad polluter. Not only, hey, even if you don't believe in climate change, it's still not fun to breathe that stuff or eat it or drink it, which is what you end up doing. So, I mean, without going down the whole, earth first kind of climate thing, but it really is true. I mean, even if you could care less about the moral side of it, I mean, just look at the practical side. We eat, drink, and breathe what's on this planet. Yeah. So the idea that your coal job is going away isn't because the left is taking your jobs away with, electric energy or alternative energy. It's because we've all come to realize in the entire world that we have a serious problem that we need to fix, and we can't fix it by pumping black coal smoke into the air. So their jobs aren't being taken away by the left. Their jobs are being taken away by change, by progress.
Yeah, it's a change that they want to look. It's a change that they also don't want to embrace and understand or grow into. And that's another thing, and that's a side thing I always have. It's like we do go through these changes in process, which we're going to go through this with AI as it's always been around, but obviously it's going to have a huge ramp up in the years to come. It's best to get on board with it and understand it rather than not understand it and not see what happens. The same way it comes to more renewable energy sources. Yeah, look at some of the things that are out there and take the time to really learn these things to really support yourself and your family, but also support your environment. Me being an environmentalist, that's how I feel about that. But it's like take this time to learn these things. I don't know a lot about AI, and of course, it's scary. It's change, obviously, but I'm going to be on the forefront to understand it and be like, okay, this is what I like about it. This is what I understand about it. This is what I think is great. And you always want to market yourself to be able to know as much as you can. To the limitations. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It may not be, and that's totally fine. You start looking at different ways to renew yourself. That's why we have things where we renew our careers and we change things. We retire. We move on. But also, you can't expect your government to do everything for you. And that's the one thing that is sad that people assume, yes, it's there. Yes, we have policies in place. We have a constitution. It's a abiding system, but it shouldn't be your end to all. And sometimes I feel, in my personal opinion, I feel like MAGA thinks the government should be disabolished, but also they should fix everything. So you're really contradicting yourself on two major sides. So I'm like, you want to overthrow it, but then you want a government. So I'm really trying to understand what you mean by this, because it's just, and once again, I'm not saying stupid or dumb. I like to listen and take in, but there gets to a point when you tell me that birds are mechanical and aren't real creatures that I have to start, stepping back and being like, okay, all right,
Yeah, it's very interesting talking with people who are true believers, who are true cultists.
And it's like, listen, I don't want to say I want to say you're wrong 100%, but I also want to be like, maybe take some time to just learn certain things and let me sip you something, or maybe a newsletter that Jack Russell's.
There you go. There you go. Have my newsletter.
Yeah. Just take a look and just educate yourself, because, like I said, 90% of the time, we want to be right, and our level of greed and power has gotten to a level nowadays. And as we stated earlier, where people are just getting away with so much shit. Companies, 100% are doing that.
Oh yeah.
Our government's letting them do that. Obviously, they're not saying, "Oh, well, we're regulating." You're not. And it's like this corporate greed that's happening, and working for a corporation, I've seen this over the years. It's kind of sad. I mean, now I'm in a place where our company's really good about like not being that way. They're not based in America, so it's why.
I got you.
But I think ideally
Nobody heard you. You're good.
No one heard you. No one heard me. But here's the thing. It's like, our American companies are just so built on greed. I mean, Jeff Bezos, the other one I can't stand, the one that does Tesla. I try to forget his name.
Elon Musk. Yeah.
It's just like you have these billionaires and millionaires who are just doing things that are just make no sense. I mean, I granted the technology is there. Yes, we have Amazon. Love Amazon. Can't really go against it. But it's how you go about doing the business and the corners you're cutting to make things happen. And you're just making yourself richer in the process. You think you're really doing a better thing by making these things. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's just you gloating and saying, I can do this, and I'm the only person. I was like, really, have we gone to these other places in the world and build Tesla factories and infrastructures that probably need a company to do that? Maybe bring some jobs to certain places. Is he doing that? Most likely he's not.
Right.
Because it's all about the almighty dollar. So, and that's the part that I think is very sad to see that. And I don't know why MAGA doesn't understand this. It's like, you got to see it from all points of views. You don't have to agree with it. Once again, you don't have to agree with it. But just enlighten yourself. Fox News is not everything. I'm sorry. They're idiots too. And I can stand by that because I have worked with some of them. But ideally, it's just, you got to look at every aspect of it. And I'm not far left libertarian, but I believe in liberal politics. But also, I can understand where the Republican Party comes from because I open my mind and I learn and I listen. I know CNN is not the all of all things. It is very liberal, obviously. I try to look at Fox from what it is. It's not everything. But once again, one of the things I do is that I make sure to plant myself in certain aspects to open my eyes up to understanding different aspects and then formulate an opinion for myself, which is what the MAGA Party should be doing. But it's, as you said earlier, it's a fear of retaliation. Oh, if I don't say that, then all of a sudden I'm out. I never fell apart where I have friends who are liberals. I say something that was a little Republican, which I have said a couple of times, and they're just like, okay, well, that's your opinion. I'm not cashing it out of the fucking party, but it's like on that side, if that was to happen, oh, you might just be torched and lynched, or it's sad because you've seen this happen to people, and it's like almost to the point where people just want to be. I think just want to be. I want to say bandwagons in a level of sports, and I hate to say that. Where so we're just a bandwagon magnet people because they're just like, oh, I can just get away with anything. I can say what I want. They don't probably believe in half the stuff that's going on, but because it's a radical view of something. It's like, oh yeah, I want to do it. Oh yeah, I want to go to cool people. Oh yeah, I want to be part of this. And it's like, do you even know what's going on? Do you have any idea what's happening? Like, what is going on? Like, it's like, come on. Like, please.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons you're not going to see a convert. I mean, I have two dreams that are part of this PR blitz that I'm doing to try to talk to everybody and get the message out, like you said. One is having someone go to Russell at magaterrorism.com and send me a message saying, hey, I used to belong to MAGA. I've read what you were talking about. I've opened my mind. I've given it some thought. And yeah, these guys are criminals. They're doing terrorist acts. Even though a lot of the stuff they're doing, I agree with and I want to happen, I'm not going to support them because they're criminals and they're bad people. I would love that. I don't think it's going to happen. But I would love to have one person be turned and say, hey, you know what? What I do believe doesn't make sense. There's all sorts of facts showing that what I believe is untrue. Okay, I'm a big, proud American who's for the First Amendment, but I let the government violate the First Amendment. Yeah. Okay, I'm a proud government member, and I want to protect the Constitution of the United States of America, but yet I violate the 12th Amendment by attacking the Capitol. There's all these conflicts in how they think. But I've talked to people who believe the Earth is only 6,000 years old. There's no way I'm going to convince them it's not, even though there's enormous amounts of evidence showing that it's more than 6,000 years old. And even for the people who are pious, who do believe in the Bible, nothing in the Bible is literal as far as time. I mean, if there's an all-powerful God, do you think he wrote it down to the second on how long something was? No, he was probably talking in its terms. Maybe 6,000 years was 6 million years or 6 billion years to it. Yeah. But the whole idea that the earth is literally 6,000 of our years old is so debunked that you have to be stupid to believe it. Sorry, I know it's going to make a lot of people mad, but you do. The earth is not 6,000 years old. It just simply isn't. But trying to convince them or a flat earther of the truth is a lot like trying to convince MAGA. No matter how many facts you show them, they're just going to simply say your facts aren't true. Ours are. Yeah. And there's nothing to do for it. You can't help them unless they want to be helped. And there are some people who have come back from that, who something opened their mind up and they're like, wait a minute, something I believe doesn't make sense. It's hypocritical. And it got them thinking and looking. And those are the ones we can bring back. The ones who are true believers, no, we'll never get them.
And that's the sad truth. Well, Russell, where can people go to learn more about you, your book? Do you have a website or a personal page that you direct people to?
I do. So I have a website, which is magaterrorism.com, and you can reach me at russell@magaterrorism.com. And like I said, my book, Is MAGA a Terrorist Movement, is available on all 3 versions on Amazon. It's print version, the ebook, and also the audiobook. And again, even if you have no intention of buying the book, I would love a positive review. Those always help balance the negative ones. But as I said before, as I said, I think it was in my newsletter, I said, even if I was the first ever 0-star rating, I'd keep going. But I appreciate the reviews, especially the written ones, because people can see, the 4 and 5-star ones over here saying, hey, here's what I thought about the book. The 1 stars over here, they're pro-MAGA. And even for the people who are in between, the 2 to 4-star people, that written thing tells people, hey, here's why I gave it that rating. I have no problem if you gave me a lower rating because you're like, well, I just didn't like the way you wrote. I didn't like the way the book was structured. I didn't really agree with some of the angles you had. Great. Please give a written review so that I can see that. And everyone else can see it. But when you see the 1-star reviews by MAGA, they're not using facts. So it's very clear in their that's where you can reach me.
I don't even know how to learn how to leave a review. But anyway, I'll get into my tangent on a different time. But Russell, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your information, and I'll be sure to have everyone check out your website and your book. I wish you all the best of success. And let's hopefully this November.
Let's defeat MAGA.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
try to keep our liberal democracy intact. So
I hope.
And hey, if the Republicans get their party back, that would be fantastic. I miss the days where it was just like I voted Republican or I voted Democrat. Not I am a Republican or a Democrat. So I look forward to those days again. So
awesome. All right, Russell. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.